You're listening to the Product Coalition podcast with Jay Stansel. This is where product mastery happens. This is where careers are made. Welcome to the Product Coalition podcast. Let's go.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the Product Coalition podcast. My name's Jay Stansel, and today I'm genuinely excited about this conversation because it gets into something I think a lot of product teams are quietly wrestling with right now. My guest is Saurabh Sharma. Now, Saurabh is the Chief Product Officer at You.com, where his team is building some of the most advanced AI agents for enterprise business workflows. Before that, he spent over 11 years at Google, where he led product across Google Assistant, Gmail, Family Link, Google Maps, and Google+. He's also run Google's Voice AI investment program, making seed and Series A bets in the voice and AI space, and piloted the first Google for Startups Voice AI Accelerator with 12 companies. Now, after Google, he was head of search products at OpenSea during that Web3 wave. Now, here is why this conversation matters. At Google, Saurabh shipped products to billions of users who consumed what his team built. At You.com, something fundamentally different is happening. His enterprise customers are not just using the product, they are building their own workflows and agents on top of it. Now, that changes everything about how you run a product team, how you do research, how you think about your roadmap, and honestly, how you define even what that product is. So today we're going to dig into what happens when your users stop being passive consumers of the product and start becoming builders on top of the product. We're going to look into what breaks in the traditional PM playbook for products like this, and how do you know when your product has outgrown a feature-led roadmap? And we're also going to dig into some of these new terms, like what does agent management actually look like in practice when your customers are deploying agents as fast as you are shipping. Saurabh, welcome to the show. This is a fantastic topic. It's really unique, and I'm really excited to jump in and pick your brains and grab some expertise from you today.
Great. Thank you for having me, Jay. Excited to be here.
So, Saurabh, an incredible career. So many different products you've touched along on your journey. Right now, we're in a different phase of product management when it comes to the types of products we're building and the types of products teams we're building to create those products. Now, could you get us going just by establishing some of the fundamentals of You.com before we go into some of the specifics around what product management is when it comes to differences between what you're doing as a platform versus traditional building products for passive consumption?
Yeah, great question. So fundamentally today, You.com is focused on building AI web search infrastructure. And what that means is that large language models are trained to a specific point in time, right? Their training date usually ends a quarter or two before they ship. And so if they want to understand information from the real world, news, stocks, weather, what's happening after their training date, they need augmentation. And You.com provides that augmentation layer through our web search APIs, through our content extraction APIs, through our research APIs, so that users can build better agents, developers can build better agents augmented with real world information.
Saurabh, every product leader I've spoken to, over 100 plus episodes, have had their own unique career journeys that shape how they see the world. Do you mind sharing a little bit around where did your career start? I mentioned a lot of Google in amongst it there. And what really drove you to progress and jump into this industry of tech and product management?
Yeah, great question. I think that, I started my career actually at IBM, and I was in engineering and engineering management at IBM. And throughout my time there, I had always been interested not only in the development that the company was doing, but how people were using the products that we were building, how they were selling it, how they were getting feedback from customers that evolved it. And I started to realize that I love the developer side, but I also love talking to the customer side, thinking about what is the roadmap that matters for customers. I ended up doing a small startup that really put me into that position, and I found that I love that experience. And after that small startup, after its time had passed, it felt that product management was the right path for me moving forward. So spent a wonderful decade plus at Google, but it was always itching to get back into the startup space, and OpenSea and now You.com I really enjoy product management in the startup space. Things are often moving, they move fast, and you have the ability to respond very agilely. And it's been a wonderful journey.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, let's get into some of the key questions I had for you here, Saurabh. Now, when building Google Assistant, users consumed what you shipped, but at you.com, customers build their own workflows on your APIs. What changes about how you run your product team?
I think it's fundamentally vastly different, right? When you're building a consumer product, let's say Google Assistant, you own the job to be done, right? What do you want to enable users to be able to do? Play music, set timers, understand the weather, right? You are determining the universe of things that can be done, and you're designing the system to incentivize and push people to be able to do those type of things and find the value. As an infrastructure provider, it is 180, right? We're not the builders. Our customers are the builders, and we own the primitives that drive the jobs to be done. And so our goal, when I was at Google, we would think about, does this feature ship? What user problem does it solve, right? At you.com, what we think about is this a primitive that belongs at the platform layer, or is this something that happens at the application layer that developers should drive themselves? It's a fundamentally different way of thinking. Now, that said, the similarities are that we are thinking about the job to be done that we enable and think about. The difference is that our users are building those jobs to be done. We play a supporting role in enabling that broader capability and broader application to be built. And so a lot of times what we're thinking about is not about can we add a specific feature, but can we add a composable primitive that enables a range of use cases that we see. As an example, with our web search API, what we noticed was a lot of customers were then bolting on the ability to scrape web pages that we were returning via our web search API. And so we added the live crawl capability because we saw it as a fundamental primitive to expose, as opposed to something that developers should continue to bolt on.
Fantastic. I noticed you keep using this word primitive, Saurabh, and that's quite unique. I've not heard people wrapping that into product management conversation. Can I ask, what is it around that word, around why is it so important for you internally to look at primitive versus non-primitive from, I assume, a prioritization perspective?
Yeah. What we look to do is we look to build the building blocks that developers need to create their products. And in a way, it is similar to consumer product management. You want to have a tight set of features that can be world-class and you can drive excellence in, as opposed to a very broad spectrum of features that perhaps you may not have excellence in. And so when we think about our platform, we think about what are the right pieces of it to expose? Where do we want to be extremely high quality versus not operate and let another company operate in an adjacent space? And so we're very thoughtful about what platform capabilities we expose via what we call primitives to developers, and ensuring that those primitives are world-class and that we can build off of those primitives in a way that help developers compose better and better solutions. This is a little bit different than consumer product management, right? In that you're not always creating primitives and letting people build on top of those primitives. You're creating the end features. Internally, you're thinking about what are the core primitives to manage engineering complexity, but externally, you're thinking about features, not the building blocks that go into those features.
Can I ask, Saurabh, are the metrics, the KPIs around building primitives and measuring the performance of primitives fundamentally different to measuring features or feature usage?
I think so, right? And it goes back to that jobs to be done framing, right? As a consumer PM, I'm thinking about this is a job to be done. In Google Assistant, we would say, how many queries can we answer satisfactorily without having to punt, right? To say, oh, I can't answer this, right? And how happy are users with those queries? It's a bit different as an infrastructure PM. As an infrastructure PM, my first consideration is how much does this API cost to run? How accurate is it? How much latency is there, right? And can I find the right benchmarks that approximate general developer usage? And so I'm thinking about it from a systems perspective, right? How does it fit into a developer's needs. How does it fit into their system? Is it operating at the right accuracy, latency, and cost levels? And so my optimization function is fundamentally different. In some ways they're related, right? Accuracy is the same, but here I'm thinking about how do developers integrate into their system as opposed to, am I answering the maximum number of questions correctly? And that being the only metric I think about.
Nice, nice. Okay. Now, before the show, I mentioned great domain name, u.com. I hear there's a story to that. We didn't get into it. Could you share some more? And I think that's going to lead into the next question I've got for you.
Yeah, well, originally u.com started off as a AI consumer search engine. And for various reasons, what we found as we were building out this consumer search engine was that our core value add was our independent web index. And so that's really what we focused on. But originally, again, it was a consumer product, and u.com was a great consumer name. And so we continued to use that. It was actually a gift from Mark Benioff to our CEO, Richard Socher, when he left Salesforce. And so we're very thankful for that gift, and we continue to use it today.
Fantastic. So what I like about that is there's a story of growth there. You've mentioned some changes for u.com over time. When you're building particularly infrastructure features or these primitives that, like, as you're talking about here, Saurabh, the world's moving so fast with what businesses or consumers are demanding. It's moving very, very quickly, the change of demands. The job to be done is remaining similar, but how they expect to get that done is changing very fast. In your world, how are you looking at outgrowing features? When features on your roadmap are no longer as relevant, there's maybe some early signals that you may need to change things, either from features that you were going to build in the future that maybe you're second guessing right now, or that are already in market. How do you know when your product has outgrown that feature-led roadmap?
Yeah, it's a great question. One of the really nice things about being on the infrastructure side is that you may put something out in the world, but then how your users end up using it can be dramatically different than anything you've imagined, right? And I think that there tends to be a trap that people will see feature requests or bug reports and say, well, that's not really interesting. That's on the margins of our use cases. That's not something that we want to invest in. But I think that putting on another hat, which is, well, when our users are building workarounds for things that we didn't design, that's not a bug report. That's not in the margins of use cases that we should ignore. That's actually roadmap signal. And so a lot of times what sounds like a bug report, hey, can I control freshness, or I can't control freshness on a per query basis, that actually leads to a signal for our roadmap, which is to say, hey, don't ignore this. It's time to update our roadmap accordingly. Sometimes feature teams will say, you know what, that's just not in the job to be done, and that's not strategic to us. I think platform teams, on the other hand, say, okay, well, this is new capability that we're hearing a lot about. Maybe we should be expanding our roadmap in this direction and seeing where users are taking this, as opposed to being dogmatic about the capabilities that we offer.
I imagine u.com uses u.com. Would that be a correct assumption?
Absolutely. A lot of, there's several ways to answer that question. One thing I would say is that the simplest way to think about this is that each level of our APIs, right, uses our APIs themselves, right? So for example, our research API achieves state-of-the-art performance because it's in part based on our world-class web search API, right? And so that's one way to consider it. The other is that, often, in my own use of AI, I would prefer u.com's web search as opposed to other providers of web search. And then when I find bugs there, it's great because I'm able to report those bugs. We're able to make our product better through it as well.
Okay. I always enjoyed speaking with product leaders who eat their own dog food. They're out there, they're using it, they're feeling the same joys, emotions, pains, challenges of the product, just the same way as their customers are. I always think that brings an emotional attachment to some of the pains and helps accelerate some of that empathy building that's needed to understand customer needs.
Absolutely. But, I'll add that it is a significant shift, right? When you're a consumer product, it's far easier to be able to use your product day in and day out. You've got to invest time and effort, not only in the product team, but throughout the organization to be able to say, how do we use this product, right? So we've spent a lot of time thinking about how do we enable even developers, right, to experience the product in a day-to-day basis, to experience the positive side, the negative side. But we want more people to understand that too within the company. How do we help marketing and other functions understand the product when it's no longer a consumer product they can just go to and chat with, but is an infrastructure product that that requires a different skill set to use every day.
Now, I mentioned agent management in the intro, Saurabh, and obviously there's been a swarm of activity on the consumer side, particularly with some of the big AI companies that everyone's talking about in the news. There is empowering people to individually build agents, and for me, I see a lot of similarities between that and people bringing their own mobile phones to work back in the early 2000s and hooking up their email. That all had to be permission based. But what we saw out of that was enterprises then saw what was happening down at the grassroots level and saw actually we need to design for this as an organization at an enterprise level. Mm-hmm. For your world, can I ask, are you seeing a lot of companies coming into U.com where they've got individuals in the organization that are excited, want to be building agents, want to be building workflows, sort of hacking and slashing away privately on their devices to try and make this happen. And they're looking to now step up and build agents purposefully, deliberately and securely at a corporation level? And what does agent management look like as we're all going on this new journey of managing agents, typically for the first time in our careers?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you're hitting upon a lot of interesting points, right? I think that, to your point, 6 months ago, the story was go off and experiment, go off and see how you can improve our core business metrics using AI, right? And you saw that happening everywhere. Now the story very much, there's the famous statements from some of the folks at Uber saying, we spent our entire token budget for the year in 3 months or 4 months or whatever it might be. And what they're starting to recognize is that there's like two conflicting goals. Goal number one is explore the capability overhang, explore what AI can bring. But then there is conflicting goal number two, which is doing that in a 10,000 person organization leads to real costs that must be justified. And so what you're finding is folks are starting to explore this tension to say, perhaps, there's a subset of the world that is now focused on exploring that capability overhang. So we're not missing the next jump in productivity that AI can enable. But there's enough production workloads out there now that we need to be thinking about total cost of ownership, total cost, reliability and accuracy. And in both cases, we hear a lot of customers coming to us, right? In case number one, they're starting to understand what modern web infrastructure paired with large language models can do. For example, market intelligence teams are coming to us and saying, we'd love to be able to do analysis of our competitors, right? When are new products going on sale? When are they going out of sale, promotions, that type of stuff? Things they hadn't considered being possible to do before, right? So we're helping companies explore that capability overhang that now exists. At the same time, we're also helping them move things into production and or lower total cost of ownership when things are in production. So, I'll give you two examples, right? Often what we're hearing is that when they use, oftentimes, the big labs come with bundled search. And what they're finding is that there are opaque errors in that bundle search, right? And so they say, hey, I don't know where this bad piece of data came in. It went into my agent pipeline and it messed up my eval. And what we'll find is that, okay, let's unbundle this, right? Let's unbundle the LLM from the search provider to help you understand where the errors might be coming from. And being able to unbundle that black box helps them find, quality gaps that compound if you don't take care of them early, right? So that's use case number one. Use case number two is that when they unbundle that, what they also find is that the total cost of ownership ends up being far lower, right? So they get observability into the agents that they're building in a way that helps them debug faster. But that unbundling also creates a total cost of ownership advantage for them that, when you're having a conversation with your CFO or the people that own the P&L for your AI efforts, they're responding to that, right? Often web retrieval can be a significant part of the cost of running an agent. And so being able to both get observability into what's happening at that layer and better control costs through a product like U.com or others is a significant part of the story about bringing these agents into production environments in a way that is starting to move from, okay, just explore whatever it is and hope something happens, into, no, this is real production work that has real cost components, and we need to understand ROI as well.
Okay, fascinating. I'm gonna bring the conversation up. Coming back to product management heuristics. For someone like U.com and building this infrastructure and these primitives, how does the research side of product management compare differently to what it would do in either traditional B2B SaaS or the consumer type products that you were exposed to throughout the career?
Yeah, great question. At the end of the day, it's about instilling eval discipline, right? When we're launching a new API or creating a new product, we can't go off and talk to 50 different users and say, well, go through this flow and see what happens and tell us where things break, right? For example, when we launched our finance research API, we worked with a number of financial professionals, and what we recognized was to instill eval discipline, to make sure that what we're building actually worked, we needed to find a benchmark that made sense. That was FinSearch Comp, a publicly available emerging benchmark in the financial research space. And working with our research teams to hill climb that benchmark was a critical way that we instill discipline in the development process. Are we building something that works? Are we building something that meets the needs of customers? And so benchmarks are our eval discipline, and they're good marketing as well. But internally, we use them as a forcing mechanism to say, are we building something that works? And that replaces traditional consumer user research that you would have at a typical SaaS or B2C company.
Staying on this point, Saurabh, when you're looking to recruit product talent in to U.com, what is it that you're looking for that's different around either mindset or skill set from product managers today versus, say, 3-4 years ago?
Great question. I think that there's several areas where there's a lot of commonality, first of all, right? In many ways, what we're building isn't that different than the ML and MLPMs of years past, right? MLPMs, you had to work with labeling data. What's your labeling data source? What's your win-loss rate, right? And work through benchmarks to establish whether what you're building is moving the right direction or not. It's just ML on steroids, right? And ML moving quite fast. What we found is for our core search APIs, folks with ML experience tend to do quite well, right, on the product management in the product management world. Similarly, we have an API platform, right? That is essentially, in many ways, a B2B product, and typical activation, engagement, retention type of characteristics. The PMs that can think that way do very well in these type of roles. I think where things differ a bit from the pre-AI era is the focus on developers has shifted. There was always a part of the industry that focused on developers, but it wasn't moving as fast as AI is. And this focus on developer growth, which will lead to agent growth, is at the speed of AI is essentially a net new talent, right? Where you're bringing in several disciplines. You're bringing in somebody a highly technical PM, but a PM that understands DevRel, a PM that understands PMM in a unique way, and bringing these skills together. I think that's one area where I'm seeing a lot of a new type of hybridized role emerge that doesn't fit neatly into some of the roles that we've had in the past.
Nice, thank you. Where does the user experience oversight fit into that for you? Product managers really caring about bringing delight to a user's experience. Is there still value in that, knowing so much of the interface going forward seems to be chat, which is a common heuristic that we're all now very familiar with and always have been, some might say. But that UX and that delight bringing into that product experience, is it still something that you're striving for on the product roadmap, or is it now more around token maxing, efficiency, the cost optimizations that you spoke about?
Yeah, let me answer that in a few different ways. First of all, we have an API platform, right? And so there's a more or less traditional kind of product management approach around, are we removing friction? Is it a delightful experience for our developer audience? Where it differs a bit is, if we think about our core APIs, we essentially have to think about two sets of customers. One is the developer, and then the second is the developer's customer, which is the end user. And so in that way, I think that there is this world around, again, what I would call developer ergonomics, right? Helping a developer build better products faster. There is that instinctual joy that comes out of, okay, you release a feature, a developer says, oh, I was waiting for this, you've made my life that much simpler, or you've reduced the cost to run this, which improves my business's margins. That's where that traditional delight in helping your customer comes from. I also think that there's like one level deeper, which is if you really understand your customer. I'll give you an example. We launched this finance research API. And yes, our initial customer is developers, but their customers are financial analysts. And helping them create a better product that says, hey, this finance research API, you've got a bunch of a regulatory component as a financial analyst. This comes for free with our finance research API, working with LangChain as an example. Helping them see their needs get met through what we're building is, again, that same type of product joy that you get and feel. But you have to think 2 levels deeper. You've got to think about your customer's customer, not just your immediate customer as well.
Understood. Now, you've been through a few cycles of emerging tech over the years, Saurabh. You're now focusing on enterprise agents, but when you're building infrastructure, people can leverage it and build things in great, efficient ways, but also in incorrect or inefficient ways. What are you seeing that most product teams are getting wrong when it comes to either building modern tech products, regardless of the infrastructure, or building modern tech products on top of U.com?
It's a great question. One thing that we see a lot is the move from prototype to production is often a fairly vast expanse that people tend to underestimate, right? When you move from, I think that this is an area that we see continually where people will say, hey, this is good enough to get started, right? But as you move into a production world, especially in the enterprise space, you've got the same set of constraints and stakeholders that always existed, but with new tech that may not always be ready for enterprise scrutiny, right? I'll give an example of, you can get a prototype running quite fast, right? But when you are working through a security organization and you need to show that your infrastructure is based on zero data retention for security reasons, that hot new company that you might have started working with may not be the best solution to support your at scale enterprise needs and to be able to check the various boxes that sophisticated enterprises have, right? So I think thinking about the balance between getting a prototype up and running fast versus perhaps taking a beat to understand if this prototype is successful, do I have the right partners to go into production with? That's a critical thing that we're seeing, right? Everybody is excited to move very quickly and to show something in the AI space, to show some degree of fitting into an AI mandate. But sometimes they're not thinking through, well, hey, if this actually succeeds, how do I bring this to production? And when they have to face that task, they're starting over again.
Nice words of wisdom there. I really appreciate that, actually. Now, Saurabh, your career touched lots of different products. I want to ask you to get personal and reminisce with me for a moment. You spoke about bringing delight to the customers. But what's a personal moment through all of the products that you've touched over your career that you look back fondly on as a war story, a product management war story, where it really brings delight to remember a certain moment for you as just a product manager?
Oh, yeah, great question. I have to go back to my Google Assistant days. We launched we had wanted to reduce the number of times that the Google Assistant would answer, I don't know the answer to that question, right? And we've been struggling to think through the right way to do this for several months. And then there was an aha moment, which is, almost seemingly obvious, right, in retrospect, which is, well, why don't we just send them to Google search when we don't know the answer to that question, right? It was in retrospect so obvious and so elegant, but the team had struggled with it for quite a while. And then we launched this feature, and overnight we reduced the number of times that the assistant punted to what we call punted, which is couldn't answer the question, by I can't remember the numbers now, but it was like 60% overnight, right? With people being satisfied with those results. So those are the type of experiences and that I've always loved, and why I continue to focus on search, right? Search is an unsolved problem. At Google, I worked on search for humans. And at U.com now, I work on search for agents, a completely different world. But you're seeing that same delight when we're able to produce more accurate, more timely, more fresh results for agents. And that delight is different, of course. But what we see is that search continues to be a fundamental and unsolved problem that we're excited to be on the cutting edge of.
Wow, what a great centralized point to finish on. Our search is so critical, not just to the past, but also the present and the future, for everything that you've touched along the journey. Saurabh, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your perspective, particularly some of those war stories, and some of those moments throughout your career, but also some of the fundamentals that I think is really going to help some of the product leaders understand or possibly think differently how they manage their roadmaps, their prioritization, and their team. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here. This was a lot of fun.
Absolute pleasure. For the audience listening, thank you also for joining Saurabh and I. If you'd like to learn more about Saurabh and U.com, obviously head over to U.com. If you'd like to learn more about Product Coalition, you can do so at productcoalition.com. Until the next episode, thank you so much. Take care.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Product Coalition podcast, hosted by Jay Stansel. Got questions or want to explore more topics? Connect with Jay on LinkedIn or join the ever-growing Product Coalition community on Substack. Thanks for listening.